She wasn't supposed to be at the gala that night. A last-minute call from her sick roommate meant Arya had to fill in as a server, balancing champagne flutes while trying not to stare at wealth she couldn't comprehend. One misstep, one spilled drink on a designer gown, and she'd lose the job she desperately needed. Daniel Hughes wasn't supposed to notice her either. Billionaire tech founder with the world at his feet, surrounded by society's elite yet utterly alone in the crowd. Their eyes met across the ballroom when she stumbled, nearly dropping her tray. He reached out, steadying her with a quiet strength that felt strangely familiar. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. In that fleeting moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that would alter both their lives irreversibly. Two souls from irreconcilable worlds, yet somehow seeing each other when no one else did. The Riverside Museum Gala shimmered with wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast honeyed light across marble floors where women in couture gowns worth more than Arya's yearly salary floated between men in tailored tuxedos. The air smelled of money, expensive perfumes, aged whiskey, privilege. Arya Reynolds adjusted the bow tie on her server's uniform, her calloused hands betraying the 3 jobs she worked to put herself through night school. 26 and still sharing a studio apartment in the forgotten edges of the city, where the subway didn't reach and rent was almost manageable if you worked enough hours not to be home. Table 6 needs champagne, her supervisor barked. And for God's sake, smile. These people aren't tipping for your life story? She nodded, swallowing the retort that bubbled in her throat. Another shift, another night of invisibility. She loaded her tray with flutes and moved through the crowd, a ghost among the living. Across the room, Daniel Hughes checked his watch, a minimalist timepiece worth more than most cars. At 34, he'd built Horizon Technologies from his college dorm room into a global empire. Business magazines called him brilliant, ruthless, enigmatic. Tonight, he was simply exhausted. "There's Senator Williams," his assistant murmured at his elbow. "He's been wanting to discuss the tax initiative." Daniel nodded mechanically. Another conversation about influence and access. Another person who saw his bank account, not his face. 5 minutes, he said. "Then we're leaving." He moved toward the bar, needing a moment of quiet before another performance as Daniel Hughes, tech visionary. The crowd parted unconsciously for him, the invisible choreography of power. Arya didn't see him until it was too late. Turning from serving an elderly couple, her heel caught on the edge of a woman's gown. She stumbled forward, champagne flutes tilting precariously, her body already tensing for the disaster. Fired, rent due, final notice on her mother's medical bills flashing through her mind. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her with unexpected gentleness. The champagne settled, not a drop spilled. "I'm so sorry," she began automatically, then looked up. Daniel Hughes. She recognized him instantly, everyone would. But something else registered first, the genuine concern in eyes that seemed too weary for someone who had everything. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice lower and kinder than she'd imagined. "I should be asking you that," she managed. "I nearly baptized your suit with Dom Perignon." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something real breaking through the polished facade. "Would have improved my night, actually." He hadn't removed his hands from her shoulders, she realized. Something in his gaze made her feel strangely exposed, as if he could see past her server's uniform to the worn textbooks in her bag, the 3 missed calls from the hospital billing department, the dreams she kept folded away like precious things. "Arya," her supervisor's voice cut through the moment. "Other guests need service." Daniel's hands dropped. Something flickered across his face: annoyance. Regret. Thank you, she said, stepping back. For the save. He nodded, then on impulse, what's your name? Arya, she answered, surprised. People like him didn't ask for names. Arya, he repeated, as if memorizing it. Be careful with the champagne. She turned away, feeling his eyes follow her through the crowd. For the first time that night, she felt visible. 3 days later, Arya was restocking shelves at Gardner's Books, her afternoon job between morning classes and evening shifts at the diner. The bookstore was her sanctuary, quiet, filled with stories of worlds beyond her reach, and her boss let her read during slow periods. The bell above the door chimed. She looked up from her crouched position by the classics section and nearly dropped Dostoevsky. Daniel Hughes stood in the entryway, more casual than at the gala but no less striking in dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that probably cost more than her rent. Without the trappings of the gala, he seemed both more approachable and more intimidating. He didn't notice her at first, moving toward the literature section with purposeful steps. She could have ducked away, hidden behind the shelves, but something held her in place. You work here too? His voice startled her. Their eyes met, and recognition dawned in his. 3 jobs, she answered honestly, standing and brushing dust from her jeans. This one's my favorite. He nodded, studying her with that same searching gaze from the gala. Without makeup and the server's uniform, she felt even more exposed. Her second-hand clothes, the dark circles under her eyes, the worn thin parts of her that couldn't be hidden. I don't normally follow servers from galas, he said, a hint of self-deprecation warming his voice. But you quoted Marquez when you thought I wasn't listening. Arya blinked, remembering her whispered words to herself after their encounter, it's enough for me to be sure that you and I exist at this moment. You came to a bookstore because I quoted 100 Years of Solitude. I came because you were the only real person in that room. The rawness in his admission startled them both. Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and impossibilities. What were you looking for? She finally asked, gesturing to the shelves. Something I haven't read before, he said. Something that feels true. She considered him for a moment, then walked to the far corner of the store, returning with a worn paperback. Try this. It's not what people expect you to read, which might be exactly what you need. Their fingers brushed as he took the book. An ordinary moment made extraordinary by the current that passed between them. Why 3 jobs? He asked, not opening the book yet. Something in his tone, genuine curiosity without pity, made her answer honestly. Night school tuition. My mother's medical bills. The usual story of American healthcare and minimum wage. She smiled to soften the truth, a habit born from years of making light of struggle. There's nothing usual about you, he said quietly. The air between them thickened with possibilities neither should entertain. She belonged to a world of practical concerns: rent due on the first, textbooks bought second-hand, calculating if a carton of eggs would last the week. He occupied a realm of stock options and international flights, where money was an abstraction, not a daily battle. Your book recommendation comes with a coffee, he said suddenly. If you're allowed breaks here. She should say no. People would stare her in her faded jeans and him in clothes that whispered wealth. They'd assume things, judge them both. 15 minutes, she heard herself say. There's a place next door. As they sat across from each other, steam rising from mugs between them, the vast distance between their worlds seemed both unbridgeable and irrelevant. He asked about her studies, literature and business, an unlikely combination. She didn't mention the scholarships that hadn't come through, the loans accumulating interest. He told her about building his company, the weight of responsibility for thousands of employees. She heard what he didn't say, the loneliness of leadership, the exhaustion behind his success. When her break ended, something had shifted. They'd each glimpsed beyond the obvious boundaries that should have kept them strangers. "Thank you for the recommendation," he said, holding up the book. "And the company? Let me know what you think of it," she replied, knowing he wouldn't, knowing this strange intersection of their lives had reached its natural conclusion. But as she watched him walk away, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't finished, merely paused between chapters. A week passed. Arya convinced herself their encounter at the bookstore had been a curious aberration in the ordered universe, stars briefly aligning before returning to their prescribed orbits. Then the package arrived at Gardner's Books. "Special delivery," Mr. Gardner said, eyebrows raised as he handed her the carefully wrapped parcel. "Messenger was very specific, it go directly to you." Arya unwrapped it slowly, conscious of her boss's curious gaze. Inside lay a first edition of 100 Years of Solitude, impossibly pristine. A note card rested atop it, elegant handwriting stark against cream paper. "This was more honest than any business autobiography I've read. Your recommendation was perfect. Perhaps you'd consider continuing our literary discussion? Daniel." His phone number followed, a direct line she knew instinctively few people possessed. Mr. Gardner whistled softly. "Should I be worried about losing my best employee to a better offer?" Arya carefully rewrapped the book, her hands trembling slightly. "No. It's just complicated." She waited until her shift ended, sitting on a bench in the small park across from the store, the spring air cool against her face. The book felt heavy in her lap, weighted with implications and impossibilities. She dialed before she could reconsider. "Arya." He answered on the second ring, her name in his voice sending an unexpected current through her. "You shouldn't have," she said without preamble. "This edition costs more than I make in 2 months." "I wanted to thank you properly," he replied. "The book was exactly what I needed." She traced the edge of the package. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because it creates an imbalance. Because rare books aren't casual gifts between, whatever we are." His pause held weight. "Friends? Could we be that, perhaps? Friends." Such a simple word for the complexity between them. "People like you and people like me don't typically become friends." "I'm not interested in typical," he said, his voice lowering. "Have dinner with me. Return the book then if you still want to." She should refuse. The sensible part of her, the part that calculated expenses to the penny and never took unnecessary risks, screamed caution. But another voice whispered of possibility, of doors opening where walls should stand. "One dinner," she agreed. "Somewhere normal. No galas, no champagne." His soft laugh warmed her. "Define normal." "Somewhere I won't be the only person wearing clothes from last season. Somewhere with actual food, not artistic arrangements that leave you hungry." "I know just the place," he said, and she could hear his smile. That Friday, he waited outside her apartment building, a crumbling brownstone divided into units too small for their rent. No driver, no luxury car. He stood beside a modest sedan, incongruous in his perfectly tailored casual clothes. Her roommate had nearly fainted when Arya mentioned who she was meeting. Daniel Hughes. The Daniel Hughes. The 30 billionaire who turned down a royal princess. Arya had shrugged, borrowing her roommate's one good blouse, applying minimal makeup. It's just dinner. A thank you for a book recommendation. But as she approached him now, watching his expression transform when he saw her, she knew they were both pretending this was something simpler than it was. You drove yourself, she observed. I do know how, he replied with a hint of teasing. Sometimes the security team even lets me out alone. The restaurant surprised her, a family-owned Italian place tucked between a laundromat and a bodega. The owner greeted Daniel with genuine warmth, no fawning, no special treatment beyond a good table in the corner. Over pasta made from a grandmother's recipe, they circled closer to truths. He spoke of building his company from desperation after his father's business collapsed, of years working until exhaustion before success found him. She told him about leaving home at 18, her mother's illness, postponing dreams to manage reality. Why this book? He asked, touching the package she'd brought. Out of all the recommendations you could have made. Arya twirled pasta around her fork, considering. Because it's about a man who builds something magnificent but remains fundamentally alone. Because it questions whether success and connection can coexist. His eyes darkened. And what's your answer to that question? I don't know, she admitted. My experience is rather limited on the success front. And connection. Their gazes held, the air between them charged with unspoken recognition. Also works in progress, she said softly. When he drove her home, the silence between them felt comfortable, filled with possibilities neither was ready to name. Outside her building, he turned to her. Keep the book, he said. Please. Not as a transaction or a power play. Just as a beginning. Something in his voice, a vulnerability at odds with his public persona, made her nod. A beginning, she echoed, not entirely sure what they were starting, only that she wasn't ready for it to end. Spring mellowed into early summer. Their meetings continued, careful, measured encounters that defied categorization. Coffee between her classes. Early dinners before her night shifts. Walks through quiet parts of the city where they could be anonymous. They never discussed what they were doing, this slow orbit they'd established around each other. Friends was too simple a word, anything more acknowledged complications neither was prepared to face. Then came the gallery opening, a small affair showcasing emerging artists in a repurposed warehouse. Daniel had mentioned it casually, noting one artist's work reminded him of something Arya had described from her studies. You should come, he'd said. As my guest. If you're free Saturday. She'd hesitated only briefly before accepting. The gallery hummed with the controlled energy of the city's artistic crowd, less ostentatious than the gala but still a world removed from Arya's usual spheres. Daniel moved through the space with practiced ease, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back as they navigated the rooms, sending warmth cascading through her. Daniel Hughes. I thought that was you. They turned to find a sleek woman approaching, glass of champagne in hand, eyes sweeping over Arya with barely concealed assessment. Rebecca, Daniel nodded, his posture subtly shifting. Good to see you. You've been positively hermit-like lately, the woman continued. The charity board has been bereft without your checkbook. Her laugh tinkled like expensive jewelry. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? The slight pause spoke volumes. Arya Reynolds, Daniel said, something protective entering his voice. Arya, This is Rebecca Winters. Her family's foundation partners with Horizon on several initiatives. Arya extended her hand, acutely aware of her simple dress from a department store sale rack, the absence of designer accessories, all the visible markers of her economic reality. Charmed, Rebecca said, her grip limp, her attention already returning to Daniel. Your father was asking about you at the club last weekend. Said you've been missing board meetings. Daniel's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Business travel, he said dismissively. Arya felt a current of tension she didn't understand. In all their conversations, Daniel had mentioned his father only in past tense, speaking of him as though he were gone. Rebecca's eyes gleamed with something that made Arya instinctively uncomfortable. Well, don't be a stranger. The summer benefit series is starting soon. Your usual table is reserved, of course. She glanced at Arya again. Will you be bringing company? After she sauntered away, Daniel exhaled slowly. I apologize for Rebecca. She's the kind of person you usually socialize with. Arya finished when he trailed off. His eyes found hers, troubled. By obligation, not choice. They moved through the rest of the gallery, the easy comfort between them now strained with unspoken questions. Outside, the summer evening wrapped around them, the city lights beginning to shimmer against advancing darkness. There's somewhere else I'd like to show you, Daniel said suddenly, hailing a taxi. They rode in silence through neighborhoods that grew increasingly unfamiliar to Arya, old money areas where historic mansions stood behind wrought iron gates. The taxi stopped before an imposing stone house, lights glowing warmly from within. Daniel paid the driver, then stood looking at the house, his expression unreadable. This is where I grew up, he said quietly. Arya stood beside him, understanding dimly this was a significant threshold they were crossing. You said your father's business collapsed, she said carefully. It did. His jaw tightened. And then miraculously recovered when I was in college. My first investment algorithm paid off spectacularly. Enough to save Hughes Financial from bankruptcy, and he gestured at the mansion, maintain appearances. The pieces began falling into place. Your company's initial capital came from rebuilding what my father destroyed through risky gambles and poor management, Daniel finished. The public story is that I was a tech wunderkind who struck gold. The reality is I spent 4 years working day and night to save my family from ruin. He turned to her, his face half in shadow. My father takes credit for my success in his circles. Tells people I was continuing the family legacy, when in truth, I built something completely different to escape it. Arya absorbed this revelation, understanding now the weight he carried. Does anyone else know? My executive team. My father, of course, though he's rewritten history in his mind. And now you. The significance of this trust washed over her. For weeks, they'd shared stories, ideas, laughter, but this was different. This was the kind of truth that altered landscapes between people. Why tell me this? Why now? Daniel's gaze was steady, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Because I'm tired of the divide between who I am with you and who the world thinks I am. Because when Rebecca looked at you that way, I realized how many more Rebeccas there would be, making assumptions about why you're in my life. He took a step closer. I want you in my life, Arya. Not as some secret compartmentalized away from my real world. I want you in all of it. But you deserve to know what that means, the scrutiny, the history, the complications. She looked from him to the house that represented everything she wasn't: privilege, generational wealth, social position. Yet the man standing before her had shown her nothing but genuine respect, interest in her mind, appreciation for her perspective. "I think," she said carefully, "that we've been avoiding defining what this is between us because we're both afraid of how impossible it seems. And now I know a little more of your true story," she said, reaching for his hand. "And I'm still here." The summer night enfolded them as Daniel's fingers interlaced with hers, symbolic barriers falling away with that simple touch. They stood together before his past, facing toward an uncertain but suddenly more honest future. July brought a heat wave that left the city sweltering. Arya's apartment had no air conditioning, just a temperamental fan that circulated hot air. She'd taken to spending evenings in the bookstore past closing, Mr. Gardner sympathetically turning a blind eye as she studied in the cool basement storeroom. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel: "Dinner at my place tonight? Send address for car service." Their relationship had shifted since the night outside his childhood home, more defined, though still navigating unmarked territory. They'd settled into a rhythm of movie nights at her apartment, him sitting on her lumpy sofa without complaint, dinners at his penthouse, her initially overwhelmed by the space before finding corners that felt like him, not his wealth, and quiet moments stolen between their disparate lives. Still, they hadn't ventured into public as a couple, an unspoken agreement to preserve the bubble they'd created around themselves, free from speculation and judgment. She texted back her address and return time from work, then resumed organizing a shipment of new releases. Her phone buzzed again almost immediately, this time with a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Reynolds. This is Meridian Medical Center calling about Carmen Reynolds." Arya's blood went cold. Her mother. 30 minutes later, she was in a taxi heading to the hospital, her hands shaking as she texted Daniel to cancel dinner. Her mother had collapsed at work, another flare-up of the chronic condition that had drained their finances for years. The doctor's prognosis was guarded, his questions about insurance making Arya's stomach clench with familiar dread. She sat beside her mother's bed, Carmen's face gray against the hospital sheets, her breathing labored even with oxygen assistance. "I'm fine, Mija," Carmen insisted weakly. "Just overdid it?" Arya held her mother's hand, noting how thin it had become. "The doctor said you haven't been taking your medication regularly." Carmen looked away. "The copay went up again." "I was stretching it out until your semester ended." Familiar guilt washed over Arya, the knowledge that her education came at the cost of her mother's health, that every textbook represented medication rationed, that her dreams were subsidized by her mother's sacrifice. Hours later, after Carmen had fallen into uneasy sleep, Arya stepped into the hallway to check her messages. Daniel had responded with concern, offering to come to the hospital. She'd declined, unwilling to merge these separate parts of her life. A doctor approached with clipboard in hand. "Ms. Reynolds. We need to discuss your mother's treatment plan. The new medication protocol is showing promise, but it's not covered by her insurance," Arya finished, reading between the lines of his carefully neutral expression. He nodded apologetically. "There's a significant out-of-pocket expense. Given her history, I'd strongly recommend it, but I understand the financial considerations." "How much?" Arya asked, steel entering her voice. When he named the figure, she didn't flinch, though mentally she calculated how many extra shifts she'd need, which bills could be delayed, whether her textbooks could be sold mid-semester. "I'll figure it out," she said with more confidence than she felt. Returning to her mother's room, she found Carmen awake, anxiety evident in her eyes. "What did he say?" Arya forced a smile. "Nothing we can't handle. You focus on getting stronger." Later, sitting in the hospital cafeteria with bitter coffee cooling between her hands, Arya confronted ugly realities. Her mother needed better care than she could afford. Her education was stretching them beyond breaking. And now, this new expense threatened to collapse their fragile financial house of cards. Her phone lit up with Daniel's name. She answered wearily. "Hey," she said. "Sorry about dinner." "Don't apologize," his voice was warm with concern. "How's your mother?" "Stable. They want to try a new treatment. It's expensive." A pause. "Arya, let me help." The offer hung between them, deceptively simple yet loaded with complications. "I can't," she said finally. "Why not?" "Because." She struggled to articulate the tangle of pride, independence, and fear that made his offer impossible to accept. "Because it changes things between us. Because I won't be the struggling girl who dates the billionaire for financial rescue." "That's not who you are," he said, frustration edging his voice. "And it's not what we are." "But it's how it would look," she countered. "To everyone else. To you, eventually." "I don't care how it looks." "But I do," she said quietly. "And you should too." The tension stretched between them, their first real conflict exposing the fault lines in their carefully constructed connection. "This isn't about appearances," Daniel said finally. "This is about me caring for someone who's hurting and wanting to help. If I were a teacher or a mechanic with savings, would you still refuse?" The question struck her core. Would she? Or was her refusal tied to the vast economic gulf between them, a gulf that made his help feel like charity rather than partnership? "I need to figure this out on my own," she said at last. "Please understand." His silence spoke volumes. "I should get back to my mother," she added. "Of course," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Call if you need anything. Anything at all." She ended the call feeling hollowed out, torn between her fierce independence and the undeniable truth that she couldn't manage alone. Her mother's life shouldn't hang in the balance of her pride. Yet accepting help from Daniel felt like confirming every assumption people would make about their relationship, that she was using him, that money was her motivation, that the connection they'd built was transactional at its core. As midnight approached, sitting beside her sleeping mother, Arya made the hardest decision of her adult life. She would do what she'd always done: find another job, take out another loan, make it work somehow. But she would do it alone. She texted Daniel one last time that night, "I need some time. This situation has made me realize some things aren't meant to bridge certain divides. Thank you for everything." Then she turned off her phone, letting tears fall silently in the sterile hospital room, mourning something beautiful that had never had the chance to fully bloom. 3 weeks passed in a blur of hospital visits, extra shifts, and desperate financial calculations. Arya moved through her days like a ghost, functioning on minimal sleep and maximum determination. She'd sold her laptop, taking to writing papers in the public library. She'd given up her share of the apartment, sleeping on a friend's couch to redirect rent money toward her mother's treatment. She hadn't spoken to Daniel since that night. He'd respected her request for space, though flowers had arrived for her mother without a card, exotic blooms Carmen admired daily without knowing their source. Arya recognized them for what they were: his way of helping without crossing her boundaries. August brought stifling heat and a notice from her university. Her scholarship application for the fall semester had been denied. Without it, continuing her education became impossible. The careful balancing act she'd maintained for years finally collapsed under too much weight. That evening, she sat on a park bench after her diner shift, too exhausted to even cry. The city moved around her, indifferent to her personal catastrophe. "Excuse me." An older man in an impeccable suit approached. "Are you Aria Reynolds?" She tensed, guard immediately up. "Who's asking?" "Robert Winters," he introduced himself. "I wonder if I might have a moment of your time." The name registered Rebecca's father, chairman of the Winters Foundation. What could he possibly want with her? "Please." He gestured to the bench beside her. Cautiously, she nodded. He sat, keeping a respectful distance. "I'll be direct, Ms. Reynolds. My daughter mentioned meeting you with Daniel Hughes." I was curious. Aria bristled. "About what, exactly?" "About the woman who's caused one of the most focused businessmen I know to miss board meetings and decline social engagements for the first time in his career." She looked away. "I think you've been misinformed about my importance." "I don't believe so," he replied mildly. "In fact, I've known Daniel since he was a boy. I've never seen him as distracted or as genuine as reports suggest he's been these past months." Aria remained silent, unwilling to engage with this stranger about the private pain she carried. "Did you know," Winters continued, "that Daniel has established a healthcare foundation focusing on chronic conditions with inadequate insurance coverage?" Her head snapped up. "What?" "Announced last week. Quite substantial funding. The first initiative targets precisely the condition your mother suffers from." The world tilted beneath her. "How do you know about my mother?" "I make it my business to know things, Ms. Reynolds. Especially when they involve people I care about. Daniel's father and I have been associates for 30 years. I watched that boy build his company from nothing. Yes, I know the true story, not the public version." He studied her with surprising kindness. He structured the foundation with complete anonymity for recipients. No public relations, no publicity requirements. The mechanism ensures patients never know where the funding originated. Understanding dawned with breathtaking clarity. Daniel had found a way to help her mother without her ever knowing, without compromising her independence or their relationship. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, voice unsteady. "Because Daniel Hughes is one of the finest men I know. And because he's been walking around like a shadow of himself since whatever happened between you." Winters stood, straightening his jacket. "His foundation will help hundreds, perhaps thousands. But we both know who inspired it." He handed her a business card. "My daughter sometimes lacks tact, but our family foundation has a scholarship program you might find interesting. Merit-based, no income requirements." The application deadline was extended this week, coincidentally. Before she could respond, he nodded politely and walked away, leaving Aria with revelations crashing over her like waves. That night, she called the one person who had never judged her circumstances. "Mr. Gardner? I need advice." Her boss listened as she poured out everything: Daniel, her mother, the impossible choices, Winter's visit. "You know," he said when she finished, "your favorite authors all write about one theme: pride versus love. When does protecting your independence become self-sabotage? When does accepting help become surrender?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Neither do I. he admitted. But I do know this, there's dignity in allowing someone to care for you. Not as a transaction, but as a recognition that we're all interdependent, regardless of bank accounts. Arya sat with his words, examining the fortress of independence she'd built around her self-necessary protection that had perhaps become a prison. The next morning, she made two decisions. She applied for the Winters Foundation scholarship, on her own merits. And she wrote Daniel a letter, not a text or email, but words on paper, unfiltered and honest. She wrote about fear of losing herself in the shadow of his wealth, of becoming a project rather than a partner, of confirming every cynical assumption about why someone like her would be with someone like him. She wrote about pride, how it had protected her through years of struggle, how it had perhaps cost her something precious. She wrote about her mother's improvement with the new treatment she now understood he had made possible without taking credit or compromising her dignity. Finally, she wrote about love, not naming it directly, but acknowledging the rare connection they'd found across seemingly unbridgeable worlds. She mailed it to his office with no expectation of reply, an offering of truth that stood independent of outcome. 2 days later, as she arranged a new shipment of books, the bell above the door chimed. She looked up to find Daniel standing there, her letter visible in his hand, his eyes holding questions and cautious hope. "You found a third way," she said softly, meaning the foundation that helped without helping her directly. He nodded. "I needed to do something. Not for you, though you inspired it, but for everyone facing impossible choices between health and financial ruin." They stood amid rows of book, stories of human complexity surrounding their own unfolding narrative. "I was wrong," she admitted. "Not about wanting independence, but about refusing partnership. There's a difference I'm still learning." Daniel moved closer, the space between them charged with possibility once more. "I don't want to change your life, Arya. I just want to be part of it, challenges, complications, and all." She looked up at him, seeing beyond wealth and status to the man who had carefully respected her boundaries even while finding ethically creative ways to help others like her. "I'd like that," she said, reaching for his hand. "If you're still willing to try." His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, a bridge between worlds that suddenly seemed less impossible to cross. September brought cooling breezes and new beginnings. Arya had accepted the Winters Foundation scholarship after confirming through university channels that it was indeed merit-based, awarded through blind review. Her mother's health improved steadily with the new treatment protocol. And slowly, carefully, she and Daniel rebuilt the connection that had been strained but never fully broken. Today marked a significant threshold. Daniel's company was hosting its annual Innovation Gala, and he had asked her to attend as his date, their first public appearance together. "You don't have to do this," he'd said. "We can keep our relationship private longer if you're more comfortable." But Arya had realized something important during their separation: hiding their relationship only reinforced the idea that it was something shameful or inappropriate. Standing openly together was its own kind of statement. She smoothed the front of her dress, a midnight blue gown Eleanor, Daniel's sister, had helped her select. Simple, elegant, and purchased with her own saved money. Her hair was swept up, her makeup minimal but polished. She looked like herself, not a manufactured version trying to fit into his world. Daniel waited in her apartment's cramped living room, somehow making the space seem less shabby by his comfortable presence within it. When she emerged, his expression transformed, wonder and admiration replacing his usual composed demeanor. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "So are you," she replied, taking in his tailored tuxedo with appreciation. He smiled, offering his arm. Ready to face the wolves? As long as we face them together. At the gala, held in the glass-walled atrium of Horizon Technologies headquarters, Arya felt the weight of curious stares. Executives, investors, and tech industry elite assessed her openly, speculation evident in their glances between her and Daniel. Daniel. A silver-haired man approached, martini in hand. The mysterious CEO finally graces us with his presence at his own event. Richard. Daniel nodded, his posture subtly protective beside Arya. I'd like you to meet Arya Reynolds. Arya, Richard Harlow, our chief investor. Harlow's eyes traveled over her with undisguised curiosity. Charmed. I don't believe I've seen you at these functions before. It's my first, Arya acknowledged, meeting his gaze steadily. Arya is completing her master's in business and literature, Daniel added, a note of pride in his voice. Fascinating combination, Harlow remarked, clearly trying to place her in his mental hierarchy. And how did you two meet? Before Daniel could answer diplomatically, Arya spoke. I nearly spilled champagne on him at a charity gala where I was working as a server. Harlow's eyebrows rose, clearly not expecting such honesty. Best near accident of my life, Daniel added, his hand finding the small of her back. Throughout the evening, variations of this exchange repeated. Some, like Harlow, were merely curious. Others, particularly several women who had clearly envisioned themselves as potential partners for the billionaire CEO, were less subtle in their assessment. Ignore Rebecca, Daniel murmured after a particularly pointed interaction. She's been trying to secure a merger between our families for years. Through marriage? Arya asked, amused despite herself. The oldest form of corporate consolidation, he replied with a wry smile. As they moved through the crowd, Arya noticed something unexpected. For every skeptical glance, there was a staff member who greeted her warmly, the receptionist whose mother's medical treatment was covered by Daniel's new foundation, the janitor whose daughter received a Horizon scholarship, the cafeteria worker who recognized her from her campus dining hall job and greeted her like an old friend. Daniel's world wasn't just wealthy investors and social climbers. It was also the hundreds of employees whose lives were impacted by his company's policies and initiatives, many of which, she was learning, reflected values closer to her own than she'd initially assumed. Midway through the evening, Daniel was called away to address a minor crisis with the presentation technology. Arya found herself alone at their table, momentarily relieved by the respite from social navigation. May I join you? She looked up to find an older man standing beside her, distinguished, with Daniel's eyes and jawline. His father? Mr. Hughes, she acknowledged, tension immediately coursing through her. He sat without waiting for permission. So you're the reason my son has been distracted these past months. Arya maintained her composure. I think Daniel's quite capable of maintaining his focus when needed. Your company's stock is up 20% this quarter. A flash of surprise crossed his face, followed by assessment. You follow Horizon's performance? I follow business news generally, she replied. And I'm interested in things that matter to people I care about. Hughes leaned back, studying her with new consideration. Daniel hasn't brought anyone to company functions since college. His mother is quite curious about you. And you? I wonder what you want from my son. The bluntness might have offended her months ago. Now, secure in what she and Daniel had built, she met it directly. Nothing he hasn't freely offered: his time, his respect, his companionship. She held his gaze. I have no interest in his money, his position, or his influence, Mr. Hughes. I've managed my life independently for years, and I'll continue to do so. A long moment passed between them, her sincerity clearly unexpected. You know, he said finally, when I nearly lost everything years ago, many people disappeared from our lives. Fair weather friends, business associates who valued connection only when it benefited them. His expression softened slightly. Perhaps there's something to be said for someone who knew Daniel only after success and still sees beyond it. Before she could respond, Daniel returned, tensing visibly at finding his father with Arya. Father, he acknowledged coolly. I see you've met Arya. Indeed. Hughes stood. An illuminating conversation. He nodded to Arya. I look forward to continuing it sometime. As he walked away, Daniel turned to her with concern. What did he say to you? He wanted to know what I want from you, she answered honestly. Daniel's expression darkened. I'm sorry. He has no right to interrogate you. Actually, Arya said, taking his hand, I think he was trying, in his way, to protect you. Misguided, perhaps, but coming from something resembling care. Daniel looked skeptical but squeezed her hand in acknowledgement. Later, as the evening wound down, they stood together on the building's rooftop terrace, the city lights spread before them like earthbound stars. You were amazing tonight, Daniel said quietly. Facing all those questions, those looks. It wasn't so bad, she replied. I realized something important. I was so afraid of being judged for dating someone wealthy, I never considered you might be judged for dating someone who isn't. He turned to her, framing her face gently with his hands. The only judgment I care about is whether I'm worthy of you. That works both ways, you know, she said softly. Then perhaps we're both fortunate to have found someone who sees us clearly. As they stood together under the vast night sky, the distance between their worlds seemed to diminish, not because either had surrendered their identity, but because they had discovered something more important than social divisions. They had found genuine recognition in each other, a seeing and being seen that transcended circumstance. When Daniel kissed her, there on the rooftop with the city as witness, Arya knew they had crossed an invisible threshold. Their relationship was no longer a private exploration but a public declaration, not of defiance against social norms, but of the simple, profound truth that connection can flourish in the most unexpected places when we have the courage to acknowledge it. October painted the city in burnished gold and crimson. Arya settled into her final semester of graduate school, bolstered by the scholarship that eased her financial strain without eliminating it entirely. She still worked at Gardner's Books and occasionally at the diner, maintaining the independence that remained fundamental to her identity. Her relationship with Daniel achieved a new equilibrium, neither hiding from the differences in their circumstances nor allowing those differences to define them. They navigated both worlds now, quiet evenings in her modest apartment where they cooked simple meals and debated literature, corporate functions where she increasingly held her own, weekends exploring neighborhoods neither would have visited alone. Today, they sat in a coffee shop midway between their usual territories, a neutral ground they'd claimed as their own. Daniel reviewed architectural plans spread across the table while Arya graded student papers from her teaching assistantship. What do you think of this space? Daniel asked, sliding a rendering toward her. For the community center attached to the foundation. She studied it thoughtfully. The reading room needs more natural light. And the clinic waiting area make it less institutional. More comfortable seating, maybe a children's corner. He made notes, incorporating her suggestions without hesitation. This had become their pattern. His resources and vision combined with her practical experience of what people with limited means actually needed. "Have you considered naming it?" she asked. "The foundation, I mean." Daniel looked up, setting down his pen. "Actually, yes. I was thinking of the Reynolds Foundation." Arya stilled. "After my mother. After both of you," he said quietly. "You opened my eyes to realities I was insulated from. Carmen's struggle represents thousands of others. The healthcare system fails. It seems fitting." Emotion welled in her throat. "Daniel, that's... I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help direct it," he replied. "Not as my girlfriend, but as someone with first-hand understanding of the gaps it needs to fill. Part-time during your final semester, full-time after graduation if you're interested." She blinked, processing his words. "You want me to work for your foundation?" "With me, not for me," he corrected. "Equal partners in the initiative. Your business training combined with your lived experience makes you uniquely qualified." Arya sat back, considering. Months ago, she would have rejected this instantly, seeing it as charity disguised as opportunity. Now, she recognized something different, a genuine acknowledgement of her capabilities, separate from their personal relationship. "I'd need complete autonomy in program development," she said finally. "And a salary commensurate with the position, not inflated because of us." Daniel smiled, relief evident in his expression. "Already arranged. The board is independent, and your compensation would be set by HR standards, not me." She reached for his hand across the table. "Then yes. After graduation." Their fingers interlaced, a physical manifestation of how their separate paths had begun to converge without either losing their essential direction. Later that afternoon, they walked through a historic neighborhood Daniel was considering for the foundation's first community center location. Fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet, the autumn air crisp around them. "I have a question," Arya said, watching their breath fog in the cooling air. "A personal one." "Ask me anything," he replied. "Where do you see us in a year? In 5 years?" Daniel slowed his pace, considering her question with the seriousness it deserved. "Honestly, I see us continuing to build something neither of us could create alone. I see your career developing independently of mine, each of us supporting the other's growth." He paused, then added more softly, "I see us choosing to share our lives, not because we've erased our differences, but because we value them." "And practically speaking," she pressed, "where would we live? How would we manage the reality that your world includes $40 million homes and mine includes counting pennies for coffee?" Daniel stopped walking entirely, turning to face her. "I've been thinking about that. What if we created something new? Not my penthouse, not your current apartment. Somewhere that belongs to both of us, that reflects both our tastes, both our needs." Arya considered this. "You mean a place we choose together? And finance together," he added, understanding her unspoken concern. "Proportional to our means, but with both of us contributing." The thoughtfulness of this suggestion, acknowledging both the reality of their income disparity and her need for partnership rather than patronage, touched her deeply. "You've really been thinking about this," she said. "Every day," he admitted. "About how to build a future that honors who we both are." As they resumed walking, Arya reflected on how far they'd come from that first chance encounter. The journey hadn't erased the economic and social divides between them, but it had built bridges across those chasms, bridges sturdy enough to traverse daily without fear of collapse. That evening, as they prepared dinner in her small kitchen, Daniel chopping vegetables while she stirred sauce on the temperamental stove, Arya realized something profound. They had created a third space that belonged solely to them, defined not by external expectations but by the particular rhythm they'd established together. "I got a call from my mother today," she said, testing the sauce with a spoon. "She's been volunteering at her church's soup kitchen since she's feeling better. Said it gives purpose to her recovery." Daniel smiled. "She's remarkable. Like her daughter?" "She asked about you," Arya continued. "Wanted to know when you're coming for Sunday dinner again." The casual domesticity of this, her mother accepting Daniel not as a wealthy benefactor but simply as the man in her daughter's life, represented a victory over assumptions and prejudices on all sides. "Tell her I'll be there," he said. "I've been practicing making flan with your recipe." Arya laughed. "Brave man." Later, dishes washed and put away, Daniel insisting on helping despite her teasing that billionaires didn't do dishes, they sat on her small balcony, sharing the single comfortable chair, a blanket wrapped around them against the autumn chill. "I was so afraid," Arya admitted, her head resting against his shoulder. "Not just at the beginning, but every step. Afraid of losing myself in your world. Afraid of being seen as an accessory, a curiosity." "And now?" he asked, his arms tightening around her. She considered the question carefully. "Now I understand that the right relationship doesn't require disappearing into the other person's life. It creates space for both to exist authentically." Daniel pressed a kiss to her temple. "That's what I want for us. Not some fairy tale about crossing class divides, but something real, complicated, sometimes difficult, but honest." "Speaking of complicated," she said, shifting to look at him, "Rebecca Winters called me today." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "What did she want?" "To apologize, strangely enough. And to invite me to lunch." Arya smiled at his expression. "I said yes. I think she's genuinely curious about the woman who captured the elusive Daniel Hughes." "Should I be worried?" he asked, only half joking. "Not about Rebecca," she assured him. "But about your mother's foundation gala next month." "Possibly. I've agreed to help organize the scholarship recipients' presentation." Daniel's face softened with something like wonder. "You continue to surprise me. Stepping into these spaces on your own terms. That's the key," she replied. "On my terms. Not trying to become something I'm not, but bringing who I am into new contexts." As night settled fully around them, city lights twinkling in the distance, Arya felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The journey ahead remained untraveled, with challenges she could only partially anticipate. But the fear that had once accompanied thoughts of a future with Daniel had transformed into something else, not blind optimism, but a grounded confidence in their ability to navigate complexity together. Two people from different worlds, creating a shared language that translated across their differences without erasing them. Not a perfect solution, but a genuine beginning. November arrived with early frost and preparations for the holiday season. The Reynolds Foundation had moved from concept to reality with remarkable speed, fueled by Daniel's resources and Arya's practical vision. The first community health center would open in January, with 3 more planned throughout the city's underserved neighborhoods. Today marked another milestone, the first official gathering of their families. Carmen Reynolds had invited Daniel's parents to her modest home for Thanksgiving dinner, a bold gesture that reflected how much had changed in recent months. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Daniel asked as they drove through morning traffic. "My father can be judgmental, elitist, socially awkward," Arya supplied with a small smile. "So can half my relatives who are coming. That's family." He squeezed her hand across the console. "This matters to you, bringing everyone together." "It does," she affirmed. "Not because I expect instant harmony, but because the separation between our worlds feels increasingly artificial. These are the people who shaped us. They should know each other, even if they never become close." Daniel nodded, understanding as always the deeper currents beneath her words. For all their progress as a couple, their families remained largely separate spheres symbolic of the social divisions they navigated daily. They arrived at Carmen's small house, recently renovated with her improved health insurance benefits and her own careful savings. Thanksgiving preparations were already underway, the kitchen fragrant with traditional Puerto Rican dishes alongside American Thanksgiving staples. Carmen embraced Daniel warmly, the initial wariness long since replaced by genuine affection. "Your parents called," she told him. "Their driver is bringing them. They sound nervous." "They should be," Daniel's sister Eleanor joked, appearing from the kitchen in an apron. "They haven't eaten in a house under 10,000 square feet in decades." "Be nice," Arya chided, hugging her. In the months since meeting Eleanor, the family rebel who had rejected the corporate path to become an artist, they had formed an unexpected friendship. "Your parents are trying." "Only because Daniel threatened to spend Christmas in Puerto Rico with your family instead of at the annual Hughes Gala," Eleanor stage whispered. "Which remains an option," Daniel noted dryly. An hour later, the Hughes sleek town car pulled up outside Carmen's house. Catherine and William Hughes emerged, impeccably dressed despite Daniel's instructions to keep it casual, bearing expensive wine and looking supremely uncomfortable. Carmen greeted them at the door with characteristic warmth. "Welcome to my home," she said, accepting Catherine's stiff air kiss with good humor. "Please, come in." What followed was initially awkward. William examining the modest living room with poorly disguised assessment, Catherine perching on the sofa as though afraid to fully commit her weight to it. But as Arya's cousins arrived with boisterous energy, her uncle Miguel started telling stories, and Carmen pressed food into everyone's hands, the formality gradually gave way to something more genuine. Arya found Daniel in the kitchen, helping his mother prepare a salad. Catherine Hughes, socialite extraordinaire, somewhat uncertainly tearing lettuce under Carmen's gentle instruction. "Your mother is very patient," Catherine said when she noticed Arya. "I'm afraid I'm rather useless in kitchens." "You're doing fine," Carmen assured her. "Cooking is just practice, like anything else." Something about her mother teaching Daniel's mother a basic skill struck Arya as profoundly important, a small inversion of the power dynamic that typically favored the wealthy. Here, in Carmen's domain, Catherine's social position meant nothing compared to practical knowledge. By the time they gathered around the extended dining table, 2 card tables added to accommodate everyone, the atmosphere had warmed considerably. William Hughes, initially stiff, found unexpected common ground with Arya's uncle over classic cars. Catherine, watching Carmen coordinate the complex meal service, showed genuine admiration. "Your mother is remarkable," she murmured to Arya as they set out dessert plates. "Raising you alone, managing her health issues, and still creating all this." "She is," Arya agreed, watching Carmen laugh at something Eleanor said. "Though she'd say she's just doing what mothers do." Catherine's expression turned reflective. Some do it better than others. I was often absent, even when physically present. Delegating parenthood to nannies and schools. The unexpected vulnerability from this normally composed woman surprised Arya. Daniel turned out well, she offered. No thanks to our parenting methods, Catherine admitted quietly. He built himself, largely in opposition to what we represented. She glanced at Arya. He's different with you more himself somehow. Before Arya could respond, Daniel called everyone to the table. Following Carmen's tradition, each person shared something they were grateful for before the meal began. When Daniel's turn came, he took Arya's hand beneath the table. I'm grateful for unexpected directions, he said. For the chance meeting that brought Arya into my life, and through her, a clearer vision of what matters. William Hughes cleared his throat when his turn arrived, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional nature of the ritual. I'm grateful to be included today, he said stiffly, then added with visible effort, and to see my son happy. Later, as families mingled over coffee and dessert, Arya stood slightly apart, observing the improbable gathering. Daniel's corporate world and her working-class reality had collided today without catastrophe. Not perfect harmony, but genuine effort on all sides. Daniel found her, wrapping an arm around her waist. Penny, for your thoughts? I was just thinking about bridges, she said. Literal or metaphorical? Both, maybe. She gestured toward their families. We've been so focused on navigating between our worlds, I never considered we might actually help connect them in some small way. Daniel followed her gaze to where his father was showing her cousin's children magic tricks, hidden talents emerging in unexpected contexts. Not erasing differences, he noted, understanding as always. But finding points of connection despite them. Exactly. She turned in his arms. It's what the Foundation's trying to do, to build bridges between communities that rarely interact meaningfully. As the evening wound down, families departing with leftovers and tentative plans for future gatherings, Arya felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than any academic achievement. They had created a space, if only for one day, where the economic and social divisions that typically defined their city receded into the background. Standing on the porch as the last guests departed, Carmen put an arm around her daughter. Your young man's parents aren't so bad, she observed. Uncomfortable in normal houses, but trying. Arya laughed. That's a generous assessment. They raised a good son, Carmen said simply. Different world, same hopes for their children. In the car afterward, driving back to the apartment they'd begun looking at together, a compromise between his luxury and her practicality, Daniel reached for Arya's hand. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For believing we could do this, not just us as a couple, but bringing our entire worlds into conversation. I wouldn't have thought it possible a year ago. Arya squeezed his hand, understanding the depth of what he was acknowledging. Their relationship had begun as a seemingly impossible connection between individuals. It had grown into something that challenged not just their own assumptions but those of everyone around them. We're still figuring it out, she reminded him. One day at a time. True, he agreed. But today felt like more than just a holiday dinner. It felt like possibility. As the city lights illuminated their way home, Arya considered his words. Possibility. Not guaranteed success, not fairy tale resolution, but open doors where walls once stood. It was enough, more than enough, to build upon. December transformed the city into a glittering wonderland, skyscrapers adorned with holiday lights, store windows elaborate with displays. Arya finished her final exams, one semester away from completing her master's degree. The teaching position she'd been offered for the following year contingent on graduation represented a culmination of years of relentless work and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Daniel navigated the holiday social season with newfound purpose, leveraging events to secure support for the Reynolds Foundation. What had once been obligatory appearances became strategic opportunities to redirect wealth toward meaningful impact. Tonight was the Hughes Family Foundation's annual gala, traditionally a showcase of wealth and social positioning that Daniel had endured rather than enjoyed. This year was different. He had insisted the event highlight the scholarship recipients and community initiatives rather than the donors. "Are you nervous?" Daniel asked as they prepared in his penthouse. They hadn't moved in together yet, but Arya kept clothes here for occasions like tonight. "A little," she admitted, securing a simple pearl earring. "It's one thing to attend these events as your guest. Speaking on behalf of the scholarship program is different." He moved behind her, their eyes meeting in the mirror. "Everyone who matters is already impressed by you. The rest aren't worth worrying about." Arya smiled, appreciating his support without fully believing it. Despite months in these social circles, she still felt the weight of unspoken judgments, the subtle ways wealth recognized and protected its own. Her dress tonight was emerald green, elegant without ostentation. A graduation gift from her mother Carmen had saved for months, insisting her daughter have something special for these increasingly frequent formal events. "Ready?" Daniel asked, offering his arm. The ballroom of the historic hotel glittered with expensive decorations, the city's elite in attendance. Arya recognized faces from business magazines, social pages, and political campaigns. Unlike her first such event, she now navigated the space with hard-won confidence, greeting those she knew, engaging in the subtle dance of social positioning without surrendering her authentic self. "Ms. Reynolds," William Hughes approached, martini in hand. "You look lovely tonight." "Thank you, Mr. Hughes," she replied. Their relationship remained formal but had warmed considerably since Thanksgiving. "I understand you're speaking about the scholarship program later," he continued. "Catherine mentioned you've made quite an impression on the board." "The students make the impression," Arya corrected gently. "I just help tell their stories." He nodded, something like approval in his expression. "Well, I look forward to it." Daniel, returning with drinks, watched his father walk away. "What was that about?" "I think," Arya said slowly, "your father might be coming around to the idea of me." "He'd be a fool not to," Daniel replied. "The foundation board practically offered you leadership of the scholarship program on the spot." "On my own merits," she emphasized a point important to both of them. "Absolutely on your merits," he agreed. "Your background gives you insight none of them have." As the evening progressed, Arya found herself in conversation with Catherine Hughes and several board members, discussing the expansion of educational initiatives. No longer the curiosity Daniel's unusual choice of partner, but a valued contributor with perspective they recognized as valuable. "We've been rather short-sighted in our approach," Catherine admitted. "Funding programs without understanding the barriers students actually face. Transportation is often as critical as tuition," Arya explained. "And family obligations, work schedule success requires addressing the whole ecosystem, not just the financial component." Later, standing at the podium to introduce the scholarship recipients, Arya looked out at the gathered wealth and influence of the city. Once, she would have seen only privilege and exclusion. Now, She recognized potential partners in transformation if approached with the right balance of challenge and invitation. The students you're about to meet, she began, have overcome obstacles most of us can't imagine to pursue education. They don't need charity. They need opportunity, the same opportunity many in this room had by birthright. A ripple moved through the audience, her words direct but not accusatory, naming the inequality without assigning individual blame. What makes these young people remarkable isn't just their academic achievement, but their vision for communities many of you have never visited. They represent the future of the city, all of the city, not just its privileged centers. As the students came forward one by one, sharing their stories and aspirations, Arya watched the audience's response. Some shifted uncomfortably, confronted with realities they preferred to ignore. Others leaned forward, genuinely moved. Most important were the expressions of the students themselves, not gratitude for charity, but the dignified pride of being recognized for their potential. After the presentation, Catherine approached, visibly moved. That was illuminating. Different from our usual scholarship presentations. Thank you for allowing the change in format, Arya replied. It was the right approach, Catherine said, surprising her. William and I have been discussing adjustments to our thinking lately. She glanced toward Daniel, deep in conversation across the room. Our son has always challenged our assumptions. But seeing him with you, seeing the foundation's new direction, it's clarified things. What things? Arya asked carefully. That wealth without purpose becomes mere accumulation, Catherine said simply. Daniel found his purpose. I believe you helped him see it more clearly. The sincere acknowledgement from this woman who had initially viewed her with thinly veiled skepticism moved Arya deeply. Later, as the event wound down, Daniel found her on the terrace, stealing a moment of quiet beneath the winter stars. You were magnificent, he said, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders against the December chill. The students were magnificent, she corrected. I just introduced them. You did much more than that. He turned her gently to face him. You helped everyone in that room see them as individuals with potential, not statistics or charity cases. Arya leaned against him, absorbing his warmth. Your mother said something interesting earlier. About wealth without purpose. Did she? Daniel sounded surprised. That's not language I would have expected from her. People can change their perspectives, Arya observed. When given reason to. Speaking of change, Daniel said, something shifting in his tone. There's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. She looked up, noting the sudden seriousness in his expression. What is it? The apartment we've been looking at, he began. I know we plan to move in together after your graduation, but I've been thinking. Having second thoughts, she asked, trying to keep her voice light despite the sudden tightness in her chest. The opposite, he said quickly. I don't want to wait. Not for some arbitrary timeline we set months ago. Relief washed through her. You want to move forward sooner. I want to build our life together now, he clarified. Not just sharing space, but creating something that truly belongs to both of us. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing not a ring box as she momentarily feared they had agreed to move at their own pace, unburdened by conventional expectations but a key. The renovations are finished, he said. It's ready whenever we are. The apartment they'd chosen together, spacious but not extravagant, in a diverse neighborhood midway between their respective worlds, represented their shared vision, a physical space that honored both their needs without requiring either to fully abandon their identity. Are you sure? She asked, understanding the significance of this step. I've never been more certain of anything, he replied. Not because it's the logical next step or because it's expected, but because every day I spend with you confirms what I suspected from our first meeting, that you see me, the real me beneath the CEO, the wealth, the family name. Arya took the key, its weight symbolic of all they'd built together. I fell in love with Daniel, she said softly. Not Daniel Hughes, billionaire. Just the man who steadied my tray and looked at me like I mattered. You've always mattered, he said, drawing her close. You helped me remember what matters too. As they stood together under the winter sky, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and privilege yet grounded in something more authentic, Arya recognized how far they'd traveled from that first chance meeting. The journey hadn't erased the realities of their different backgrounds or the complexities of navigating between worlds. Instead, it had created something new, a shared perspective that drew wisdom from both their experiences. Not a fairy tale ending where differences magically dissolved, but something better, a genuine partnership between equals who valued each other precisely because of their different strengths and perspectives. Let's go home, she said, the word holding new meaning. Not his place or hers, but theirs, the physical embodiment of the bridge they'd built between worlds. 1 year later, spring sunlight streamed through the windows of the Reynolds Community Center as Arya walked through the bustling main hall. Children gathered in the arts space, seniors attended wellness classes, and community members accessed resources that had once been available only to those with means and connections. The center represented everything she and Daniel had envisioned, a bridge between worlds that offered practical support while honoring the dignity and agency of those it served. Not charity, but partnership. Not imposition of solutions, but collaborative creation of opportunities. Ms. Reynolds. A teenage girl approached, portfolio clutched to her chest. I got accepted. Full scholarship to the Art Institute. Arya embraced her warmly. Maya, that's wonderful. Your portfolio was exceptional. I couldn't have done it without the mentorship program, Maya said. Or those recommendation letters. You did the work, Arya reminded her. The talent was always yours. As Maya hurried off to share her news with other staff members, Arya continued her walk through the center. What had begun as Daniel's gesture of atonement for his family's business practices had evolved into something neither of them could have created alone: her practical understanding of community needs combined with his resources and business acumen. In the administrative wing, she found Daniel in conversation with community leaders, discussing the expansion of the center's healthcare services. No longer the isolated CEO in his tower, he had become a regular presence here, learning names, understanding challenges, applying his considerable problem-solving skills to issues that would never have crossed his desk before. He caught her eye across the room, his expression warming. After a year living together, building both their personal relationship and this shared vision, the connection between them had only deepened. Not without challenges, they still occasionally clashed over approaches, perspectives, expectations, but with a foundation of mutual respect that weathered disagreements. Arya, perfect timing, he called. We're discussing the mobile health clinic proposal. Your insights would be valuable. She joined the conversation, noting how naturally Daniel included her, how genuinely the community representatives engaged with both of them. The initial skepticism, wealthy outsider and his girlfriend playing at philanthropy, had given way to recognition of their authentic commitment. Later, walking together to the car, Daniel reached for her hand. Maya got her acceptance. Arya nodded. Full scholarship? She'll be the first in her family to attend college. One of many, he noted with satisfaction. The program's changing lives. It is, she agreed. Though I worry about sustainability if the economy shifts again. Corporate donations are always vulnerable during downturns. Daniel squeezed her hand. That's why we're establishing the endowment. To ensure the center continues regardless of economic cycles. This practical planning for future generations, thinking beyond immediate results to lasting change, characterized their approach to everything they built together. At home that evening, their shared apartment now fully transformed into a space that reflected both their tastes and values, Arya prepared for another milestone. Her mother was coming to dinner, along with Daniel's parents, to celebrate Carmen's new position as Community Outreach Director for the Reynolds Foundation. Never thought I'd be working alongside billionaires, Carmen had joked when accepting the role. But beneath the humor lay genuine pride in helping shape initiatives that served communities like the one she'd raised Arya in. As Arya arranged flowers on the dining table, she reflected on how much had changed in the 2 years since that first dance with Daniel. Her own career had blossomed, her teaching position combined with her foundation work allowing her to influence educational policy while remaining connected to students. Daniel had restructured his company's leadership to create space for his foundation involvement without sacrificing Horizon's innovation. Most significantly, they had created a shared life that honored both their backgrounds rather than requiring either to assimilate completely into the other's world. Something smells amazing, Daniel said, entering from his home office where he'd been finishing work calls. My mother's recipe, Arya replied. Though she'll probably tell me I did it wrong. He came behind her, arms encircling her waist. I have news, he said, his voice holding contained excitement. The city approved our proposal for the Economic Development Zone. 5 more centers like this one, focused on workforce development and small business incubation. Arya turned in his arms. That's wonderful. When did you hear? Just now. The mayor called personally. His expression grew more serious. It means a lot more work, a bigger commitment from both of us. Are you asking if I'm still in? She teased gently. I'm acknowledging that our vision keeps expanding, he clarified. What started as one community center has become something much larger. Arya considered this, understanding the weight of what they were building. Isn't that how meaningful change happens? Not all at once, but step by step, each success revealing new possibilities. Daniel nodded, his eyes reflecting a depth of purpose that had transformed him from the isolated CEO she'd first met. I never imagined this path before you. Success meant something entirely different. For me too, she admitted. I thought making a difference meant working within limitations, doing the best with minimal resources. You showed me how to think bigger without losing sight of individual impact. The doorbell rang, their families arriving together, another small miracle of connection across difference. As they welcomed their parents, the initial awkwardness long since replaced by genuine, if sometimes still hesitant, warmth. Arya observed how far they'd all traveled. William Hughes discussing community initiatives with knowledge and interest. Carmen sharing her insights on program development with newfound confidence. Catherine bringing photos of her volunteer work at the center's reading program. Not perfect harmony, not complete dissolution of differences, but genuine respect and recognition of shared humanity despite them. Later, after dinner and family departures, Daniel and Arya stood on their balcony overlooking the city, the downtown towers where he had once isolated himself in wealth and responsibility, the neighborhoods where she had struggled to build a future against financial obstacles, and between them, the communities where their shared vision was taking physical form. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is our life," Arya admitted, leaning against him in the cool evening air. "That a chance meeting could lead to all this." "Not just chance," Daniel corrected gently. "Choices. Every step of the way, we chose to see beyond the obvious barriers, to recognize something worthwhile in the connection despite them." She nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Their story wasn't about destiny or fairy tale transformation. It was about the deliberate, sometimes difficult choice to believe that difference could be a strength rather than an insurmountable divide. "What's next for us?" she asked, not expecting a definitive answer. Daniel considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "More centers. More students like Maya finding opportunities. More communities transformed. And personally," she pressed. He turned to face her, his expression open and certain. "Whatever we decide, together. The future isn't something that happens to us anymore. It's something we're actively creating, not just for ourselves, but for everyone these centers serve." As city lights twinkled around them, Uriah recognized the profound truth in his words. Their legacy wouldn't be measured in wealth accumulated or status achieved, but in lives transformed, opportunities created, bridges built where walls once stood. Not perfect. Not complete. But growing, evolving, reaching just as they were, individually and together. A dance that began by chance, continuing with purpose toward possibilities neither could have imagined alone. The story of Arya and Daniel reminds us that the most profound connections often emerge where we least expect them, across divides that seem unbridgeable. Their journey teaches us not that differences magically disappear when hearts align, but that they can become sources of strength when approached with honesty and respect. We live in a world increasingly stratified by wealth, education, and opportunity. These characters show us that meaningful connection requires acknowledging these realities rather than pretending they don't exist. True relationship isn't found in erasing our distinct experiences, but in bringing them into conversation, allowing each person's unique perspective to enrich and challenge the other. Perhaps most importantly, their story demonstrates that transformative change happens at the intersection of different worlds when the practical wisdom born of struggle meets the resources and influence of privilege, directed toward shared purpose. Neither Arya's intimate understanding of community needs nor Daniel's capacity to mobilize resources would have been sufficient alone. Together, they created something neither could have envisioned independently. Their legacy isn't just the love they found across difference, but the bridges they built for others to cross physical spaces where separated communities could connect, programs that recognize dignity rather than reinforcing dependency, opportunities that honored potential regardless of circumstance. In a society that often defines us by what we own or earn, they discovered the deeper truth, that our greatest wealth lies in what we build together, across differences, toward shared human flourishing. If this story touched something in you, perhaps a recognition of the walls we build between ourselves and others, or the courage it takes to reach across difference, I invite you to reflect on your own life. Where might you be missing connections that seem impossible due to perceived differences? What bridges might you help build in your community? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced a relationship that crossed social or economic boundaries? What challenges did you face? What unexpected strengths did you discover? If you found value in Arya and Daniel's journey, please consider sharing this story with someone who might need its message today, perhaps someone feeling isolated by circumstance or someone whose privilege has become a barrier to genuine connection. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge comfortable assumptions and inspire meaningful action. Our next series explores communities finding innovative solutions to seemingly intractable problems by bringing diverse perspectives together. Remember, the most powerful changes often begin with a single genuine connection across difference. Like Arya and Daniel, we can choose to see beyond surface divisions to the shared humanity beneath, not by ignoring real inequalities, but by facing them honestly and working together towards something better. What bridge will you help build today?